Kicking off our list at number 10. Vending machine killer. Okay, right off the hop, we have to know that apparently there are a lot of vending machines in Japan. Like it's something around 1 for every 23 people. So yeah, that's a lot of snacks. So in 1985 in Hiroshima, there were 12 people who passed away and 35 people who were seriously injured from being poisoned with a chemical herbicide. Now, when the string of poisonings were investigated, authorities realized that they had one thing in common, and that was the fact that they all had the same drink shortly before falling ill. So around the time of this entire ordeal, there was a company that had launched a marketing campaign where they gave a free drink with every purchase made from, you guessed it, a vending machine. One of the many vending machines in Japan. So when people didn't want their free drink, they would just leave it on top of the vending machine for the next person who came along, which is super nice and thoughtful instead of throwing it in the garbage. But on the other hand, there's some people who are not nice or thoughtful and rather horrible. And it turns out someone was taking these drinks and lacing them with poison and then leaving them back on top of the machines for some random stranger to come around, drink it, and then be sick or pass away. Like those numbers that I mentioned earlier. It's almost impossible for authorities to be able to track down whoever was doing this because, well, you have to narrow down where the person picked up the drink, and that's pretty impossible seeing as in 1985 there weren't nearly as many CCTV cameras as there are today, or vending machines apparently for that matter. So unfortunately, whoever was responsible for a mass poisoning of strangers is still out there somewhere. Number 9. Jacek Jaworek. Now, this is a man who was on the run because of horrible crimes that he committed in July of last year, so a little more recent than the 80s. He took the lives of 3 people who were a part of his own family. One of the family members was able to escape this horrific nightmare and was able to make it safely to the neighbor's house where they could call the authorities for help. But since these horrific crimes took place, he has gone missing and no one is sure of his whereabouts. Right now, it's speculated that he likely escaped from Poland where the crimes took place, but his exact whereabouts still remain quite the mystery. He could be literally anywhere, which is terrifying. Number 8, John Pyle. This human is a pile of garbage. This horrible human is not an undercover spy or an insane fraudster. He's just a monster who committed certain specific crimes that are unfortunately a little more common than any of us would like to know. Because of the nature of his crimes, I can't really talk about them here in this video because let's just say they're that brutal. But let's just say that he's definitely one of the worst kind of criminals out there. On June 24th, 2016, authorities searched his home after receiving 3 tips relating to these crimes. Now, the amount of and the severity of the incriminating evidence that they found during said search, he was charged with 30 different second-degree felonies alone off just that one search, which could bring a sentence of 450 years in prison. Now, he was arrested the same day, but he posted a bail bond of $90,000 as well as surrendering his passport. Now, fast forward 16 months, October 23rd, 2017, and of course this guy does not show up for his hearing. And thus we have a fugitive now on the
Number 7, Michael Cinquenetti III. Part 3 on this guy. This guy's crazy. Last time I talked about Judge Cinquenetti on this list, but I think this is the best one actually. This is pretty crazy. Look, sometimes youths get themselves into trouble for a whole slew of reasons. I'm sure even you guys at home agree that, you know, we all make mistakes when we're young. Everyone has. Well, this one's about someone who is all grown up now. A woman who skipped out on a cab fare. Oh, she needed the money for a new pair of shoes because when she was brought to Cincinnati's court, her sentence was to walk 30 miles in 48 hours. Yikes. For Canadian fans out there, that's like walking from Toronto to Newmarket. Oh, no thank you. Yeah, I know, right? That's the worst. But to be fair, she did ride and dash, so always pay your due, folks. I don't know. Otherwise, you'll be walking. You'll be doing the Terry Fox run, buddy. You're out. That'd be the worst one for me, dude. Are you kidding me? It's like, listen, we know you're gonna walk. No! Number 6, tough love. It's Friday night. The glow of 2 PC monitors illuminates your face. An ice cold Monster energy drink has just hit your empty stomach. Good thing you can order chicken McNuggets right at your house. Living in your mom's basement is great, except when other gamers call you out for being a sweat and you really have no comeback because you are living in your mom's basement, so it's kind of tough. Yes, the life of a millennial mid-20s who didn't move out of their parents' houses. Oh, Mom, I can't pause the game right now. It's an online match. God! Well, how about this case from Andalusia, Spain, where a 25-year-old man was taking his parents to court because they cut off his allowance. Yeah, question. Who's still getting allowance at 25? I'm 25. Someone give me allowance? I like allowance. Give me allowance. Ugh, worst! Well, seeing as this was completely ludicrous, the judge not only sided with the parents, but actually forced him on court order to move out of their parents' house and get a job. You thought it was gonna go your way, but now who's the clown? The sweaty guy in the basement. Number 5, penalty of the sack. Man, this one is just so brutal. Here's one from ancient Rome because we gotta mix it up a little bit. Some modern, some from the past. Here we go. I would not wish this upon my worst enemy. So once found of a worse enough crime to deserve this, you would be placed in a large leather sack. But because Romans are super nice and don't want you to be lonely, they give you some pets to keep you company. Also placed in the sack with you is a chicken, a dog, a monkey, and a snake. Wow, that sounds like quite the party. You might get a little thirsty in there having so much fun, so then the animal squad entourage in you is thrown into a body of fast moving water just to cool off. How nice. All jokes aside, this is a horrible and brutal method that has several animal agencies looking for a time machine just to talk to the Romans and ask them, hey man, not cool, you know? That's crazy. I can't even imagine that. Have you ever been whitewater rafting before? That's that plus a monkey and a snake. Oh, I don't like that. Number 4, Xmas Slammer Blues. Nobody wants their Christmas to get ruined. Even the people that say they hate Christmas. How can you say no to a gift? I know I can. I love gifts. Well, Bettina Young, a woman from Ohio, knows what it's like to have her Christmas ruined. Young had been involved in a driver's license scandal, which, given some drivers on the road today, makes a lot of sense where they got their license from. I don't know. Well, her sentence was very unusual to say the least. She was to spend 5 Christmases in jail. No, not 5 literal years as Christmases. What they actually mean is she was to spend 5 Christmases in jail, meaning all the other days of the year she would be free, on probation of course, but come Christmas time she wouldn't be cutting turkey, she would be in jail away from her family thinking about what she has done. That's kind of weird though. It's like, hey guys, I'll see you after Christmas, I gotta go. Where are you going? I'm going to jail. I'm just gonna spend a weekend in jail. You know, I'm just gonna spend a weekend in jail. No big deal.
Number 3. Jason Derek Brown. This piece of work has been missing ever since November 2004. That's quite a long time, but that doesn't mean authorities have given up just yet. Jason fled from Phoenix, Arizona in the year after he allegedly took the life of an armored car guard who was just outside of a movie theater. Now, after committing this already horrific crime, he then took the money and then ran, just to make things even worse. On the FBI website, where it details his crimes as well as other details about him and who to contact with any information, all that good stuff, it gives a little bio on Jason, and it says that he enjoys being the center of attention and that he clearly likes showing off his luxurious lifestyle. Yeah, it's crazy how many of these people are known for trying to flaunt their stolen lifestyle. Another thing the website reminds us is that he should be considered armed and dangerous at all times. Number 2, the River City Ripper. One of the most terrifying things that exists are, of course, serial killers who are still on the loose, especially when you find out that they've been recently active, right? That's the horrible new news that we don't want to hear. Now, this serial killer is wanted in connection to 4 different incidents that occurred in Little Rock, Arkansas, and 3 of which were fatal. These horrific crimes took place between August of 2020 and April of 2021, and despite one of the victims thankfully surviving the attack and being able to provide a description of the assailant, there's still, of course, very little to go on in terms of actually being able to identify this horrible human being. The FBI was contacted shortly after the survivor was able to give a testimony to authorities, and their behavioral analysis team created a profile of this unidentified killer. So there's work being done, although there's little evidence, there's still some momentum. And finally, number 1, Pedro Lopez. Pedro Lopez had a very difficult life growing up, and unfortunately this led to him living a life committing a plethora of horrible crimes throughout South America during the 1970s. Now, by the time the 80s had rolled around, he had made a mistake during one of these awful crimes, and this led to his arrest. Now, once in police custody, he spilled everything on basically his entire life and confessed at that point to an insane amount of crimes. Just confessed to everything and just unloaded. Like, we're talking confessing to 240 killings on top of the 110 that they already suspected him of doing. Police were a little skeptical of just how many crimes he said he committed, but Pedro was able to lead them to a mass grave where they recovered a total of 53 people's remains. So at that point they're like, yeah, we believe you, this is horrible. Pedro of course went to jail, but get this, he was somehow released in 1994, which is absolutely insane. That's why I had to put him on number 1 here. He was sent to some sort of mental institution for 3 years, but he was also released from there for good behavior. That's horrible. Kicking off the list at number 10, Albert Fish. Albert is one of the oldest people on this list. He was dubbed the Brooklyn Vampire or the Moon Maniac. So that's great. Or the Boogeyman himself. Those are the 3 nicknames that he goes by. That's absolutely horrible. It's pretty clear that Albert was a terrible human being who did terrible things that I can't really say. But as his nickname hints towards, he did some horrible things, right? Obviously. In the early 1900s, Albert was arrested, tried, and convicted for killing and doing other things with his teeth to 3 people, but the horror was not over yet. No, Albert began to claim that although people knew about 3, that number was really closer to 100. And he even claimed that a lot of these victims came from every state. That's disgusting. And to make matters even worse, as if it wasn't already horrible enough, this deranged lunatic also sent a letter to the mother of one of his victims. He detailed everything about how he lured her and the rest of these horrific things that occurred afterwards, things that I can't say on this, YouTube box. This is one of those people that I'm not, sad at all they don't exist anymore. This is, I'm all about like rehab and treating people, but I'm like, just don't exist. How about that? You just stop eating people. Number 9, Robert Pickton. This horrible person is one of the worst Canadians to ever live and is one of our country's worst serial killers of all time. Pickton dropped out of school and began working at his family's pig farm, and this is where most of his absolutely horrific crimes took place, at this farm. He was first arrested in 2002 and was convicted in 2007 of taking the lives of 6 people, but throughout an extremely lengthy investigation, evidence of many more killings came to light. It's always more than we think, which is horrible. During his time in jail, an undercover police officer posed as his cellmate, and Pickton confessed to 49 crimes to him. 49. Apparently he was saying to this undercover officer that he wanted to take one more life to make it an even 50, and that he only got caught because he was sloppy. It makes me sick saying that out loud. It's disgusting. The entire trial was a bit of a mess, but it led to a life sentence without the possibility of parole for 25 years, which was the longest possible sentence under Canadian law at the time. This unfortunately does mean that he will be eligible for parole within the next decade. So, yep, let's move on with the list. Number 8, Robert Hansen. Robert is often referred to as the Butcher Baker, and his story is, again, obviously horrific. He's one of the most prolific serial killers in Alaska's history because for over a decade, he would kidnap women and bring them into the wilderness where he would then stalk them like prey. How do these people exist? I'm just not realizing that there's definitely an episode of Criminal Minds about this guy. There probably is, right? Sometimes the premise is so dark that it just sticks with you forever. This is one of those. The reason he got away with his crimes for so long is because outside of these horrific crimes, he was a soft-spoken baker. Yeah, he was a baker, like I said. One of my friends is a baker. I'm gonna message him. I'm gonna ask so many questions now. Robert was heading to church by day and then prowling gentlemen's clubs at night looking for the next victim. What led to the downfall of this horrible monster was this bad named Cindy Paulson, who changed history, okay? She was able to escape from Robert and was sure to leave evidence behind. She made sure of that. Then she went to authorities and told them what exactly happened, and this of course led to a search warrant for Robert's property, which is where all of said evidence was waiting, and then Robert was obviously found guilty. Robert is believed to have taken the lives of at least 17 women, and in 1983 he was sentenced to 461 years and a life sentence without the possibility of parole. So yeah, unless you got some Tuck Everlasting water, you're gone, pal. Run. Number 7. The Beer Man. He took the lives of at least 6 people in Mumbai, India between October 2006 and January of 2007. It's not a lot of time at all. That's a lot of people in a very short amount of time. The reason this unidentified monster is called the Beer Man, such an odd nickname, is due to one fact about each crime scene, which ended up being how they linked these crimes together in the first place. This was the presence of beer bottles that were found scattered next to each of the bodies that were found. Now, of course, it's been over a decade since the crimes were committed, so it's definitely upsetting that this person has yet to have been caught, obviously. But it's been a while, so maybe they're naturally gone. You know what I'm saying? Number 6, the Honolulu Killer. This is another one of those horrible, horrifying, unidentified serial killers who was active in and around Honolulu, Hawaii. Now, these crimes took place in 1985 and 1986, and throughout those years, it's said that whoever is responsible for these crimes took the lives of at least 5 women. These women seemingly didn't have any connection to each other as they were all from different walks of life, but because of the gruesome similarities between each of them, authorities were able to determine that they were likely committed by the same horrible person. Despite the years that it's been, the perpetrator has never been identified and could still be out there somewhere hiding from taking responsibility for their actions. Number 5, the Doodler, another stupid nickname for another horrible unidentified killer. He received his nickname due to the fact that he would sketch his victims before taking their lives. Yeah, how sinister is that? You see that on TikTok, but this is like the evil, horrible version of that. This unidentified killer committed their crimes in the San Francisco area from January 1974 to September 1975, and they specifically targeted the gay community. It's believed that 14 deaths can be attributed to this killer, while 3 others were injured in the process. Unfortunately, because of the stigma and the sensitivity surrounding gay men at the time, the 3 who survived this monster's attacks were very reluctant when speaking to authorities for fear of being outed as a result of it. This of course has led to there being very little information for them to work with in terms of, actually identifying the person responsible. But for a while there was a primary suspect, but that person has never been officially charged because sadly none of the survivors felt comfortable enough to testify in court. There's also a very real chance that authorities know who the killer is but just don't have the evidence to prove it in the court of law, which is also a terrifying thought. Number 4. The I-70. This unidentified killer is known to have taken the lives of 6 store clerks in the Midwest back in the spring of 1992. The reason he is referred to as the I-70 killer is because most of the stores were just a few miles off Interstate 70, I-70. While most of his victims were women, there was one man, but it's believed that he may have been expecting a female employee at the time, and that's the only difference there. The killings were clearly the main objective of his crimes as well, considering the fact that each scene there was only a small amount of cash that was actually taken. Aside from these initial 6 crimes, it's thought that he also might be responsible for the deaths of 3 more store clerks in Texas back in 1993 and 1990. Number 3. Adnan Kolak. This Turkish serial killer who was responsible for taking the lives of 11 women, who were all ages between 68 and 95, absolutely horrible. He was also responsible for 6 more crimes once he was convicted that were also elderly women. So again, there's more than we initially thought. Now down the road, he eventually got caught for these horrible crimes, thankfully, and he was sentenced to 6 death sentences as well as 40 years in prison, just to make sure, just to top it off. Right? I would hope that's the case, make it 80 years. Sure, doesn't matter at that point. The point is, see you never. Get the fuck out of here. Now, this was back in 1995 when he was first sentenced, but cut to 2004, the death penalty in Turkey was abolished, which meant that in May 2005, Adnan Kolak was released from jail. His nickname is the Artvin Monster, and he was released from jail. Yeah, I have a nickname for him personally, but I can't say any of those words on YouTube, so I'll just save that for later. Number 2, Charlene Gallego. A match made in hell, it seems. This is twisted. Back in the late 70s, Charlene Gallego, alongside her horrible husband, Gerald, were the worst in Sacramento, California. They kidnapped and then later killed 10 victims. They kept them and then abused them for a while, horribly, before ultimately ending their lives. Now, it really was the most twisted situation. Just disgusting people, really. Cut to 1984, Charlene pleads guilty to murder and receives 16 years. Her horrible husband was waiting for execution, but he died of cancer before meeting his demise. One of those things where you're like, close, you got close. Charlene got out and moved to Fair Oaks, California, and has since changed her name. So one of them's dead, one of them's absolutely free, and changes her name. Yep, sleeping fair. And finally, number 1, the Zodiac Killer. Of course, this one had to make it on the list because, why, of course. There's a plethora of terrifying people on this list here, but nothing is as terrifying as an uncaught serial killer. And the Zodiac is definitely the most prolific of them all. The Zodiac Killer took the lives of 5 people in the San Francisco Bay Area between December 1968 and October 1969. He was most known for targeting young couples or a lone male cab driver, one of the two. Now, despite 2 people luckily and thankfully escaping his attempted evil doings, he still has never been caught. He was one of those losers who left notes and stuff for the police to find, thought he was like a DC villain, thought he was cool. One of those psychos. While no one's ever heard from the Zodiac since 1974, the case remains active in many different countries, and maybe one day we'll finally know who the real Zodiac Killer is.
Number 10, Boudica. She was very tall, the glance of her eye most fierce, her voice harsh. A great mass of the reddest hair fell down to her hips. Her appearance was terrifying. Sounds awesome to me. One of the most famous queens in British history, Queen Boudica was originally co-ruler of the Iceni tribe of East Anglia alongside her husband King Prasutagus. That is, she was until the Roman governor of Britain at the time attacked. Prasutagus was killed and his lands and household were plundered by the Romans. Boudica and her daughters were rather savagely treated as well. So much so that after the fact she rose up, leading other tribes of Britons who banded together and decided to take the fight back to the Romans. The Britons captured the Roman settlement of modern-day Colchester, with the imperial agent fleeing to Gaul. They fought to London and to St. Albans, storming the cities and sending the defenders fleeing. The Britons desecrated the Roman cemeteries, mutilating statues and breaking tombstones. The Roman governor of Britain at the time, who had fled with his troops into the safety of the Roman military zone, challenged Boudica with an army of 10,000 regulars and auxiliaries. "Win the battle or perish, that is what I, a woman, will do. You men can live on in slavery if that's what you want." It's a pretty good quote. The battle was a brutal defeat though, with Boudica taking poison to avoid becoming a prisoner. Criminal to the Romans, but I mean, a hero to pretty much everyone else. Number 9. Nefertiti. Kind of hard to call this a crime, but basically Nefertiti was the wife of the Egyptian pharaoh Amenhotep IV. Being close to equal in power to her husband, as well as very influential in her own right, she and her husband did something quite scandalous. They decided to turn their backs on almost the entire pantheon of Egyptian gods. Sort of. They made one god the prime god of Egyptian religion during their reign. That would be the god of the sun, Aten. They moved the capital of Egypt to a new location, which they named after Aten, and they even both changed their names. He became Akhenaten, and she became, give me a sec here, Nefertiti. There's like a hyphen in there, I don't know. Both of those names, as you may have noticed, have the name Aten in them. Nobody liked this change, and it was quickly reverted after they were no longer in power. Sure was scandalous though. Number 8. Anne Boleyn. Honestly, for most of the wives of Henry VIII, it's a little hard to, well, 1, pick one, but also 2, really know if any of the things they were accused of actually happened or if they were just easy excuses. But nonetheless, here we are, and since we haven't talked about any before, why not start with the second one, who was pretty much the catalyst for Henry VIII and England breaking away from the Roman Catholic Church and forming a whole new church, resulting in the deaths of an eventual thousands of people. You see, divorce is strictly prohibited in the Roman Catholic Church, so when Henry met Anne, his wife Catherine, who had not produced him a son to carry his name, just kinda had to go, prompting the whole damn Reformation. Was it worth it? No! Because the marriage lasted 3 years before she was charged with infidelity and incest, and lost her head. I kinda feel bad for anyone associated with King Henry VIII though.
Number 7. Chester Turner. Chester is an American serial killer who on April 30th, 2007 was convicted of taking the lives of 11 women in the Los Angeles area. And on June 19th, 2014, he was convicted of 4 more that they were able to tie back to him. So again, it's more than we think. He's been referred to by prosecutors as one of the most prolific serial killers in the city's history. And if you know anything about LA history, you'll know that's pretty f***ed up to hear. In his original trial that led to conviction, Chester was sentenced to death, but at the following one, in 2014, he also received an additional death sentence. Nice, just an extra one just for fun. Just throw in a couple more. In the end, like with a lot of these kinds of cases, in the end, DNA came to save the day and help authorities find out who was committing these horrible, horrible crimes. So, A1 for science. We locked them up, we found out. Number 6, Jeffrey Dahmer. Of course, we have to throw in Jeffrey Dahmer, one of the most well-known serial killers with his crimes taking place from 1978 to 1991. Your parents probably remember a lot of this. His crimes are far too brutal for this channel or this website, but he's known for taking the lives of 17 different people, I'll say that. At his trial, not only did he plead not guilty, but his attorney had some interesting words for the court. His attorney stated that his bloody pattern had caused him to believe that he himself was the devil, which was intended to, bolster his insanity plea and help him out. Again, that devil made me do it type of bullshit. His attorney said that he became enamored, overwhelmed, and caught up in the character in the movie The Exorcist 3. Said character was Satan because he was the personification of evil. Not only was Jeffrey found to be sane and ended up being sentenced to multiple life sentences in prison, but not too long after his sentence started, he was killed by a fellow inmate. I wonder if the devil made him do it. That'd be ironic, huh? Number 5, Sam Little. Known for being one of the worst serial killers in history, Sam's confessed to taking the lives of more than 90 people, and while authorities have only been able to for sure connect him to 30, they say they have no reason to doubt the validity of his other confessions. They're like, yeah, it probably happened. If he's saying it, sadly, it's probably the truth. Sam was able to continue on this horrible path for so many years because of the fact that he committed these crimes in different states and kept moving, right? Different counties, of course, made it difficult to connect his crimes to one another. Man was on the move. In an interview with an investigator named Sergeant LeBlanc, as they discussed religious beliefs, they spoke about the nature of sin. Now, Sam stated he had no fear of God and said that God made him this way, so why should he ask for forgiveness? He's just trying to be cool or something, try to make his life a haiku all of a sudden. We're like, no, you're just a crazy person. He said that God knew everything he did. He also allegedly told a few select people that he believed that he was the devil. There it is. See, it's always something. It's always the devil something. Devil made me blank. It's like, okay. Number 4, Arne Johnson. Speak of the devil. This one's definitely the most well-known one. Here we go. This one's a little bit different. It's now a cinematic adventure, apparently. This trial was well-known previously, but of course it became more widely spread as it was the trial in the newest Conjuring movie. That's what it was based off of. In 1981, Arne Cheyenne Johnston killed 40-year-old Alan Bono in what appeared to have been a simple argument gone wrong quickly. It got way more twisted and confusing, right? When it came to his defense for the crime, he said the devil made him do it. Just like that third installment in the Conjuring franchise. The title, The Devil Made Me Do It, is in direct relation. This is not just a cool James Wan Conjuring title. This is the real case. This was the first time in history that possession has been used in an American courtroom as a defense. Pretty interesting, right? You think about it. You hear these stories often, but it has to go somewhere. It has to go to court. This was the first time that happened. Arne had been at the scene of about 3 exorcisms that had occurred prior to his alleged possession and then his, killing. And this is why there's so many believers that believe that he's actually possessed or that the devil made him do it because he was part of these exorcisms or whatever. Because he was guilty by association, a couple exorcisms, so now he's evil apparently. At the end of the day, the jury in the trial decided to convict him of manslaughter.
Number 3, the Great She-Wolf of France. Queen Isabella of France started off her queen life married to Edward II of England, who preferred the company of men to his own wife. This is obviously a precarious and possibly extremely frustrating situation to find oneself in, but she kept it bottled up and even gave birth to a son, Edward III. Until it all came to a head when her husband found a new favorite. She visited France and had an affair with Lord Roger Mortimer, an exile from England. But the better twist came when Isabella, alongside Mortimer and a mercenary army, invaded England, took the throne, and she became Queen Regent for her son Edward III until he came into power. She also was probably responsible for the dispatching of her husband Edward II while he was captured. Eventually her son would come into power and she was imprisoned for 2 years before being allowed to live a quieter life in retirement. Number 2. Queen Fredegund. I was constantly double-taking almost the entire time I was reading about this woman. She was crazy ruthless and all seemingly for the betterment of both her bloodline and the Merovingian kingdom. She became queen in the 5th century, marrying King Chilperic, and organizing the death of Queen Galswintha and sending Queen Odovera to a convent. When Brunhild, a big enemy for the king, and sister of the late queen, swore vengeance on them, Fredegund brutally destroyed Brunhild's husband and sisters, destroying them as in that kind of thing. The queen also made sure that all of the other heirs to the throne stopped breathing, making it a sure thing that her bloodline would occupy the Merovingian throne. Her son, Clotaire II, was only a baby when the king met his end in 587, so, of course, this ambitious queen rose up to power, fighting battles, quelling rebellions, and ensuring the smooth running of the Merovingian kingdom in her role as Queen Regent. She met her end in 597, 10 years after her husband, but Clotaire II continued in his mom's footsteps, having Brunhild and all her descendants removed from existence, resulting in 20 years of peace. So it's good. Number 1. Cleopatra. A list of scandalous queens would not be complete without one of the most well-known and famous rulers in history. Cleopatra VII Philopator was the last pharaoh Egypt ever had, reigning from 51 to 30 BC. Her life was full of scandal. When she first came into power, she was co-ruler with her husband and brother, Ptolemy XIII. But that didn't last very long as the two did not see eye to eye and it started a huge civil war in the country. At the same time, a conflict from Rome made its way to Egypt as well, resulting in Julius Caesar allegedly being seduced by Cleopatra and helping her end her brother's life. And again, being co-ruler with another of her brothers, also named Ptolemy, and ending the life of one of her sisters. She was also having an affair with Caesar and even produced a son with him, who became co-ruler with her after Caesar's death and after her other brother was seemingly assassinated. I'm so glad I was not a part of these families. Just death and betrayal everywhere. She then went on to seduce second Roman triumvirate member Mark Antony and sided with him when Octavian and Mark Antony engaged in the final war of the Roman Republic, which Anthony lost, fighting with and alongside him until she poisoned herself to avoid being paraded through Rome and executed by the victorious Octavian.
Number 10, Robert Rostango. This is a weird one. When I got to high school, cell phones and meme culture were already a mainstay in our culture. It wasn't in its infancy, but it was there. I was the first generation to have teachers tell us to put our phones away. By the time I got to senior year, smartphones were pretty much, well, like they are today. And there was a class full of rowdy teenagers more interested in planking than, what our anthro teacher had to say. Wasn't a big fan of my anthro teacher, she wasn't very nice. Constant buzzing, ringing, and popular girls walking in late to class with a bench handbag twice the size of our desks. Good times. Teachers need a raise. Well, Judge Robert Rostango in 2005 was already fed up with cell phones. And that's even way before we were arguing over if the dress was black and blue or white and gold. Remember that? I do. Judge Rostango was so fed up with phones in his court that he told everybody, if it goes off again and no one claims it, if it's not theirs, if it's yours, you're all going to jail. You're all going to be thrown in jail for contempt of court. After a cell phone did ring, he he wasn't bluffing as he threw everybody in jail for contempt of court. Mind you, they only stayed a couple hours and they were eventually released, the charges were dropped, and a few years later he was fired. So yeah, kind of a weird story, but wow, keep your cell phones off, you know, you go to jail. Number 9, Michael Cinconetti, the first. This guy's pretty interesting, a judge from Ohio with creative punishments. For the first case of his creative punishment, it involved a local high school student who was fed up with something. What? I'm not sure, but it was probably a legit reason. Well, with his edgelord rage, he mowed an offensive abbreviation in the high school lawn. Kind of a weird thing to do. I don't know why you'd mow something offensive in the lawn, like, oh, I hate the system, I'm gonna mow their lawn. So when the crook was caught and brought before Judge Cinconetti, well, the young mischief maker wasn't ready. Instead of jail time or juvenile hall, he had the option, instead of going there, to mow the entire lawn of the high school with a manual push mower. It doesn't sound that bad, but if you've ever actually used a manual push mower before, then you know how labor intensive that could be. Lessons learned, I hope. They're not fun. After after a day of using it, you gotta take the blades off, sharpen them, you gotta oil. Oh, it's no good, no good. Number 8, Michael Cinconetti, the second part. Here we go. This guy's got a couple under his belt. It's pretty cool. Another youth in trouble of being sucked into the justice system of America. And there's Judge Cinconetti to save the day. In another case, a troubled youth had spray painted graffiti where graffiti shan't be. Truth be told, I think graffiti adds color to the city, especially downtown alleys. I mean, how am I supposed to know whose turf I'm on? Not that I could read it anyway. However, the youth was facing up to 10 days in jail, but instead Judge Cinconetti offered that the criminal Rembrandt use his talents for good. He was to paint an old beat up handrail black. Except he had to do it with a toothbrush instead of a paintbrush. Now, given my paint background, I'd say he got off pretty easily. The worst part would have been the fumes from the paint, but then again, even some folks enjoy that too, so I don't know. Wouldn't be that bad. You actually get a lot done. It's still a brush. It might be a small brush, but you still get a lot done.
Number 7, Queen Dita. Queen Dita of Kashmir was quite an ambitious queen mother. Dita seized complete administrative control during her husband's reign, ultimately becoming queen regent for her son and grandsons. That ain't enough for Miss Dita here. Mere advisory for her? No sir, she despised being just an advisor, and well, she disposed of all 3 of her grandsons using medieval forms of witchcraft and torture. Yikes. How dare they make Jima their advisor? Queen Dita got what she wanted at least, as she then reigned as monarch for 23 years, being in some form of power for nearly the whole of Kashmir's 10th century. And while she may have been more than a little brutal, she was honestly one of the best and strongest rulers Kashmir has ever had. Number 6, Queen Nandi. Queen Nandi of the Zulu Empire has a story that literally sounds like it's straight out of a movie. Before the Zulu Empire ever came to become a thing at all, Nandi was impregnated by a Zulu chief in the 1700s, giving birth to a son they named Shaka. But being the 3rd wife of the chief, she and her son were often ridiculed and shamed by other chieftains. Despite all that, Nandi raised Shaka to be an extremely fierce warrior. Shaka grew up to become the Zulu chief in 1815, and Nandi became the queen mother alongside him, known in English as the great she-elephant. She, alongside her son, wreaked havoc on those who had mistreated her and Shaka. But since Shaka remained unmarried, it was Nandi who, funnily enough, remained the power behind the throne of the Zulu Empire throughout her lifetime. She is the reason the empire ever existed in the first place, and if any of what she did was a crime, I kinda get it. Number 5. Julia Agrippina, Nero maker. Yes, making Nero should be considered a crime. But honestly, Julia Agrippina of Rome did quite a bit more than just that, and I can see where Nero got it all from. You see, Agrippina wanted to be in power, and when her uncle, Emperor Claudius, separated from his wife due to a scandal, Agrippina saw an opportunity, no matter how messed up it seems to both us and the people of the time. Agrippina seduced her uncle, became his 4th wife, and by extension, became the empress. But it doesn't stop there. She manipulated her uncle husband into making her son Nero heir to the throne and set up a marriage between Nero and her daughter-in-law Octavia. It's even rumored that she poisoned the food that ended her husband's life, allowing Nero to rise to power, which really bit her in the butt when Nero had her assassinated. What is this crazy family? Good God. Number 4. Queen Theodora. Queen Theodora was scandalous before she even became queen. She was involved in theater from a young age, and one of her most well-known character portrayals involved her stripping down to next to nothingness. But her acting career slowed right down when she met and married Justinian I, who was the heir to the throne of the Byzantine Empire. The two of them were as thick as thieves and ruled together, but that doesn't mean she didn't have a knack for dispatching of those who threatened her position. She was scandalous, but she did way more good than she did bad. She set up houses for ladies of the night, worked for women's marriage and dowry rights, and banished brothel keepers from the Byzantine Empire. She was also a huge supporter of monophysitism. I hope I said that right. She's even considered a saint in the Eastern Orthodox Church of the modern day. Killing it, Theo. That's kind of a bad joke, actually.
Number 3. Hip Hop and Bach. There's really nothing worse than a neighbor who's too loud, especially for their own good. You can go house searching in this market, look all over, and finally find the right place. Ooh, too bad your neighbor's a metalhead and doesn't care about the bylaws. Uh-oh. Listen, I can jam to Metallica all day, but it is best to respect those around you. It's the way I feel. Well, Andrew Vactor was that neighbor, and after finding himself in court, he was facing a $150 fine. Or he had the option to listen to classical music for 20 hours and pay only $35. He got about 15 minutes into Bach before he got up and decided to pay the $150 fine. He said he was late to band practice, but in actuality it was more of he didn't want to listen to the music, which he was doing because he was loud and making people listen to music that they didn't want to listen to. It's, how the tables have turned. Number 2, Ash Tower. This one's from ancient Persia. So basically, you get a large wooden tower, say about 3 stories. And on the inside, you get yourself a nice fire going. Nice big fire going. You let it burn for a couple of days to create a nice pile of ash. Now, you just need a perpetrator to toss in there. As if that weren't enough, the tower has a wheel and a pole in the center that allows an operator on the outside to stir you up like a cake batter from hell. Thus, your punishment would be to spend time in a swirling dust storm of hot fire, ash, and horribleness. God, that sounds awful. Oof, no thanks. And number 1, Milk and Honey. This one's just so diabolical. I can't even. Even James Bond villains are saying, oh, that's a bit much, isn't it? And the chief? Well, you know what the chief said. He said that's not it. A very unique punishment from, again, ancient Persia. It goes as follows. You take your perpetrator and you tie him down to a boat so both arms and legs are bound, something like that. Then you come by every day to a boat that's hovering near the shore and force feed the crook milk and honey until they cannot take it anymore. It often leads to a boat full of refunded lunch, human waste, or even sometimes a crocodile might come by for some free lunch, brought to you by the judicial system of ancient Persia. Ooh, no thank you. No thanks.